On this week's NESN Patriots Podcast, we have another Patriots scandal to talk about. Plus, we discuss the Patriots' loss to the Kansas City Chiefs and preview their upcoming matchup with the lowly Cincinnati Bengals. Hello and welcome to this week's NESN Patriots Podcast. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Zack Cox. Zack, our week got turned upside down a little bit here. How are you doing?
Doing well. I've been trying to figure out the correct term for what we're experiencing right now.
Controversy, scandal?
I've landed on controversy. I feel like scandal might be a little too strong because it seems, we'll get much more into this in the coming minutes here, but scandal seems a little, it implies some nefarious intent. And I personally believe the Patriots' statement that there was not nefarious intent in this, but I don't know.
I've been avoiding writing scandal, but like on a podcast, I'm just like, whatever. I'm just going to say scandal because I don't know. I think those things I equate differently in my mind. But let's talk about that to start off. The Patriots were discovered. That is the term that I've decided to use, not caught. They were discovered taping the Bengals sideline during last week's Bengals-Browns game in Cleveland. It was supposedly a member of the Patriots' TV production department who was doing this. Jeff Howe of The Athletic wrote that it was a producer who was in the front row, had his tripod set up with a monitor, shooting the Bengals sideline. Bengals personnel caught wind of it, told him to stop, reported him to the NFL. They supposedly taped him doing it for 8 minutes, so they were really intent on getting the Patriots caught on this. The Patriots say that they were in Cleveland to do a Do Your Job documentary episode on the advanced scout who was in Cleveland scouting the Bengals because the Patriots play them this week. And basically what the Patriots are saying is that TV production guy did not know any better and that he was trying to shoot B-roll of the sideline because that is something that an advanced scout would be watching during a game is the Bengals sideline. So I think that pretty much sums it up as kind of the overarching bubble of the situation. Thoughts?
Yes, that was a nice little summary right there. I think that pretty much touched on everything. And I feel like people should know, too. I don't know if this is totally clear to people who are not either in the industry or around this team a lot. The Patriots video department and the Patriots production department are two different things.
Yes.
The Patriots video department are the actual team football staffers who will record the games. If you ever see the coach's film of any game, that's the Patriots video department filming it. That is the film that gets distributed back to the coaches and cut up into the... And
there's actually a Do Your Job episode on the Patriots video department.
Very, very interesting stuff.
Yes.
So that's they are part of the quote-unquote football staff that Bill Belichick has talked about this week. The production department is not part of the football staff. They make the Do Your Jobs. They'll do the Patriots All Access, all of that.
Right, like the Megan O'Brien stand-ups and
like Bill Belichick's weekly thing with Scott Zolak. Right. They produce that. So that's
the
all
Illustrator,
the production department is kind of public-facing, outward-facing, and the video department is inward-facing. So they are two different entities. I think that's clear, but that was kind of the main point that Bill Belichick was trying to make this week, saying this was not our video department doing this. Right. This was our production department, which Bill Belichick does not control.
This is not a perfect comparison, but I'm going to use it anyway. Like, basically, it is slightly different, but think of it almost as if, like, it's NESN and the Red Sox. Mm-hmm. NESN is 90% owned by the Red Sox. But if there was a NESN photog who this is a complete hypothetical situation. If a NESN photog was shooting an opposing team's dugout, no one would really bat an eyelash about that, I feel like, because the company is called NESN rather than Red Sox Video Network. But that's essentially similar to what this situation is, where this producer who works for, I'm not sure if they're still called Craft Sports Productions or if it used to be called Craft Sports Productions.
I think they are. But
he works for them. He's technically a Patriots employee because he works in the same building as the Patriots and everything, but it is a separate entity. It's not football, it's TV production. So 75, 90%, I don't know what you want to say, believe the Patriots series of events here where it was unintentional, it was a mistake, it was a unfortunate coincidence, basically, that this happened when the Patriots have done something similar to this in the past with Spygate back in 2006 and 2007, and they got caught and were punished in 2008. The one question that remains, and I asked Bill Belichick about this morning, was the scout that the Patriots were doing the Do Your Job feature on was in the same press box as this guy who was shooting the Bengals sideline. And I don't know if he was sitting behind him. I don't know if he was sitting next to him. But he was in the same vicinity as him, we think. So that guy should have known better. So the biggest question is why he didn't butt in and say, hey, we're not allowed to do that. Maybe he was in a completely different part of the press box. Maybe he was completely unaware. Bill Belichick said that he was doing his job. I definitely think that's a possibility. At the same time, you do definitely have to wonder, did he see this happening? Because he was literally in the same room as the producer.
It's definitely a valid question. I think and I, like you, don't know the exact answer to that question, but in my mind, it just seems to me that this is a guy who is, as Bill Belichick said, doing his job. His job is to watch the Bengals and watch the Bengals sideline and whatnot. And, I mean, if I was in that position, if I was an advanced scout going to a game and the team said, or the production company said, hey, we're going to send a film crew with you this week, I'd be like, all right, fine. Like, this is cool, whatever. Let's get this. It's good content for the fans and whatnot, but, like, stay out of my way. Let me do my job.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and direct shots and tell you what to do or do it. Like, you do everything. You can film me while I do my stuff, but I'm not going to pay attention to you. If that, I can see that being the case where he just didn't know that any part of this was going on. He just knew that they were going to film him for a bit, probably film some stuff in the press box, film whatever, and then I'm sure there was quite a commotion once the Bengals accosted them.
Essentially, the biggest question is, where were the two people located?
Yeah.
Where was the photog located and where was the scout located?
And there have been some additional details of this continue to trickle out. I'm sure by the end of the week we'll get a diagram of the press box where everybody exactly was. But yeah, it's definitely something that if the scout who was being filmed either knew what they were doing or even saw what they were doing, he should have known that this was going to cause, even if they were doing it totally innocuously, just trying to get an image of what he might be seeing, he should have said, guys, like, this is going to be a big, big deal if someone from the Bengals sees you doing this, even though you're not trying to do anything with it, it's a very bad look, especially given the history of the Patriots.
The Bengals reportedly are very angry about this situation, which does make me laugh a little bit because the Bengals are 1-12, and like, I can understand you don't want to be spied on, you want to win a game, but like, I don't know, I guess you would think the worst if it's the Patriots doing it, but at the same time, it's almost kind of like, don't flatter yourselves. like maybe the Patriots, maybe there is like this completely reasonable excuse for this happening, which it does sound like there is. But then the other case that our colleague Matt Chatham has brought up quite a bit on Twitter is that there's nothing really to be gleaned from watching an opposing team sideline. At the same time, it is still against NFL rules. So even if, every single call that the Bengals have going through headsets, nothing's happening on the sideline, you still are not allowed to tape an opposing team's sideline. So, I mean, I think that him bringing that up helps the Patriots' case that this was an innocent mistake, but it is still breaking the rules, and the Patriots basically acknowledged the fact that they did break the rules. It was accidental, but that they did break the rules.
It was beyond basically. They said, we broke the rules. They basically said, they're in their team statement and in...
We take responsibility.
And in some of Bill Belichick's statements since then, he's basically said, this is what happened.
Right.
We did not intend... The intent was not malicious, as I mentioned before, but this is what happened. Which is why it's curious to me to see so many Patriots fans on social media and everywhere else just saying, look, like, they apologize. Obviously, like, read their statement. Like, this was not cheating. Like, why would they possibly be punished for this?
Right.
They literally admitted that they broke the rules. Even just because you admit you break a rule doesn't mean that you should not then get punished for breaking that rule.
Right.
Maybe you get punished less than if you just tried to say, oh, no, of course we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think this should be a loss of draft picks kind of situation. But
No.
I do think the Patriots should be punished for this. I do
Yes.
think they should be fined. It should be an organizational fine because, again, they broke the rules. Regardless of what you could benefit, how the team could benefit from breaking said rules and whether they intended to break said rules were still broken. So there needs to be some sort of punishment, I think.
Right. I think that, yeah, like you said, probably a fine. It sounds like that's probably going to be what happens based on all the reports out of NFL media.
Sounds like it's not supposed to be too severe.
Right. They said, I think Judy Battista said on NFL Media or NFL Network today that basically what's on the footage isn't much more than you would be able to find on a game broadcast or on the coach's film. There's two other things that I just want to bring up quickly before we move on from this topic, and that's that, first of all, if this was some sort of nefarious dealings, I don't think that Bill Belichick would be asking the Kraft production department to cheat for him. And I guess that is one other question, is that if it is somehow found out that the employee who was shooting this wasn't a member of Kraft Sports Production and instead was a football staff member, then that changes the course of the story. But if it is a Kraft Sports Productions employee, like we're led to believe, that's not who the Patriots would be hiring to cheat for them. Because that's someone who has like no real ties to the Patriots whatsoever, could move on to a different job in production at a moment's notice. There would be no repercussions for a future job, whereas if it's someone who actually works in football, then there would be potential ramifications if they did rat out the Patriots or deal with that. The other thing with this is that the guy was in the press box in front of hundreds or whatever number of media members who could report on this, plus Bengals personnel, literally setting up directly in front of the people who aren't supposed to see what they're doing.
Wearing a Boston Bruins hoodie or whatever it is, according to those reports.
So I can understand hidden in plain view and all that stuff, but you would think that would be literally the last place in that stadium where they would be trying to do that, is directly in front of the people that they are supposedly spying on.
Yeah, it's just way too brazen for it to be cheating, openly, aggressively cheating in my mind. It doesn't make sense for both with the kind of potential information gained from this versus the potential risk of doing this in front of, as you mentioned, hundreds of people in the press box, including the entire Bengals staff. It just doesn't make any sense. And I've also been, it was interesting to hear one of Bill Belichick's comments this week. I think it was on his call with the Bengals media, where he was asked about Spygate, which was back in 2009, the whole videotaping incident with the Jets. And he was asked about how, I don't know the exact wording of the question, but it was sort of about how that incident relates to this incident. And he was basically saying, after that happened, the Patriots went out of their way to not even come close to the potential line that could be crossed. They stayed another step or two back from it just because they knew that they had no margin for error, really. They knew
this is going to be like the worst production quality possible, but I have it right here.
How much Trump pick and of the penalty? It's pretty well, after it's well documented the penalties y'all suffered in 2008 after the NFL took first round pick and fined y'all. How much differently do y'all operate as an organization between in the 11 years ensuing that, in your mind?
What was the first? I missed the first part of that question.
I said, I guess essentially, how differently do y'all operate, after everything that happened in 2008 when the NFL fined y'all and took a draft pick? How differently, just from an entire, as an entire franchise, do y'all function now than maybe you did before all that happened?
Long pause.
I mean, we've always tried to do everything the right way. Look, we're competitive and we'll, try to be competitive in every area, but I mean, we don't knowingly, intentionally want to do anything that crosses the line. But since that's happened, I'd say we've tried to keep a good distance behind the line and not maybe take it as
So yeah, that's the quote that, they've always tried to stay behind the line, and he's basically saying that they're trying to stay even further behind the line since Deflategate, or since Spygate. But the inference there that maybe they were taking it closer to the line prior to Spygate is definitely interesting.
Definitely. And Spygate was 2007, not 2009, as I mentioned earlier.
Right. Yes, that's correct. All right. So I think that pretty much covers that entire controversy, right?
I think so.
I think we handled it pretty well there. Patriots did lose to the Chiefs on Sunday. That feels like a lifetime ago at this point, based on everything that's gone down since then. But obviously the biggest issue at the time of that game was the officiating. The Patriots had a chance to score twice at the end of the third quarter, leading into the beginning of the fourth quarter, and the officials essentially called back 2 Patriots touchdowns. They could have scored on a Stephon Gilmore fumble recovery, and then on the Patriots' ensuing drive after they were credited with that fumble recovery, they should have scored on a N'Keal Harry catch and run, basically, where the officials thought that he stepped out of bounds when he did not. He dove for the pylon, scored a touchdown. The Patriots went on to kick a field goal on that drive, and then on their final drive of the game, when they should have only been trailing by 3, they got the ball down to the 5-yard line, Kansas City's 5-yard line. Would have been able to kick a field goal if one of those touchdowns had counted, but they weren't able to score a touchdown that drive and wound up losing by that 7 points. 23-16. So definitely not a perfect performance by the Patriots before officials scurried their way into it. But I think that there's certainly reason for the Patriots to be pretty upset about the officiating in that game.
Yeah, the officiating was terrible. It was bad even before those 2 key plays, the Stephon Gilmore fumble recovery and the N'Keal Harry touchdown. Even if you took those plays out, this still would have been a poorly officiated game. It was just sloppy by Jerome Boger's crew, who's been in the game for a long time, been doing this for a very long time. There's really no excuse for any officiating crew, especially one that was this experienced, to be this disorganized and just flat out wrong on several occasions. There are also a couple borderline calls that went against both teams. There was a defensive pass interference that probably should have been called against Philip Dorsett on the Patriots' final drive. Also a couple really ticky-tack. There was one, a holding call and a blindside block call on Chiefs offensive linemen that were pretty weak if you look back on the replay. Footballzebras.com, who obviously covers this, the refereeing industry very closely, they also pointed out that the officials only marked off 5 yards for a penalty that should have been 10 yards. So it was
that was on the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was a disaster all the way around. It wasn't even really a game where fans of either team could come out saying, "Oh, the refs screwed us," because the refs were pretty equally bad on both sides.
One of the worst ones was Tom Brady threw the ball away basically at Matt LaCosse's feet, and Jerome Bogart threw a flag on it, and he was going to call it for intentional grounding. Brady basically had to point like, "That's Matt LaCosse. He's a tight end.
Not our tackle. He's
wearing number 83. I threw at him. Pick up your damn flag." It was pretty egregious.
It was bad. Yeah, it was, and it made for some interesting moments in the Patriots locker room after the game, because most players obviously they hate to blame things on the refs, or at least they hate to blame things on the refs to the media. But a surprising number of players were basically willing to just say, the refs screwed us in this game. Duron Harmon even said this was one of the toughest losses that he's experienced in the NFL, and he's a guy that's lost a Super Bowl and a couple of AFC Championship games. Stephon Gilmore said he absolutely would have scored on that fumble recovery. Philip Dorsett said he was 99% sure he was interfered with on that play. So it's just a mess, and you really hate to see football games decided by these kind of just bad officiating decisions. Now, that said, the Patriots did not play particularly well for long stretches of this game. Their defense played very well in the second half, but they did allow a 48-yard touchdown. Very similar to, this one was to Mecole Hardman, but it was very similar to a lot of those touchdowns they allowed to Tyreek Hill in the last 2 times they played. These 2 teams played at Gillette Stadium. Only allowed 3 points in the second half, held Patrick Mahomes to 57 passing yards in the second half. Obviously positives there, but the Patriots offense just really continued to drag itself along. I mean, they scored a touchdown on their first drive, but they needed 2 third-down pass interferences and a flea flicker to score that touchdown. And then they basically did nothing for until late in the third quarter. They had one stretch of 3 offensive possessions where they gained a total of -1 yards. It was bad. They found a little bit of a rhythm at the very end, but it's becoming it's more than a trend for this team at this point. This is 5 games in a row that the offense has underperformed and really not looked like a below average offense. And I don't know how you fix it, because there's no new players coming in. They're going to have to roll with the players that they have. There are some guys can still get healthier. N'Keal Harry can get more involved, but it's tough to point to an obvious fix for this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are pointing the finger at Tom Brady, and Tom Brady isn't a guy who needs to be defended, obviously, but I think that he's getting kind of the raw deal in a lot of this stuff, because, I mean, I've really closely watched Tom Brady in the last 2 games, and I'm not really seeing anything much differently from him, other than maybe he's not overcoming obstacles quite as well as he might have in the past, but he really can't trust anyone on this offense other than Julian Edelman, who's having a fantastic season, James White, who's really come on the last 2 weeks, and left guard Joe Thuney. Beyond that, no one is trustworthy. The offensive line was horrendous against the Chiefs.
Extremely bad.
Center James Ferentz was getting bullied. Marcus Cannon still seems to be recovering from that illness. He had another tough game. Isaiah Wynn was really bad in that game as well. He got thrown around by the Chiefs' defensive line. So Brady didn't have a lot of time to throw. A lot of the time he was having to bail on plays or throwing off his back foot. And then his receivers were dropping passes. Jacoby Myers had, I think he was only credited with 2 drops, but he had another one that was called back by a penalty, or that was a pass interference play. But if he had made the catch, it would have been a bigger play for him. James White, I think, dropped a pass, but he's Matt Lacoste. There's just not a lot of trustworthy options on that Patriots offense besides those guys that I mentioned. Sonny Michel really isn't picking up yards. He had 5 carries for 8 yards. Brady should be blamed for the interception that he threw. He didn't anticipate that Rashad Breeland was going to drop off of Julian Edelman and cut short Matt Lacoste's route. So that's certainly something that can be blamed on Brady. There were a couple of inaccurate passes that can be blamed on Brady. But most of the blame is the offensive line faltering and the receivers just not being trustworthy options. And former NFL quarterback Dan Orlovsky had a good segment on ESPN this week where on the final play of the Patriots offense, Brady forced the ball to Julian Edelman when he had Jacoby Myers open for a first down on a crossing route. But basically what Dan Orlovsky said was, you can't really blame Brady for not going to Myers on that throw because he had already dropped 3 passes. The only pass that Jacoby Myers caught all game was on a pass from running back James White. Yeah. So you do sort of feel for Brady that he can't trust anyone, and that maybe he's not doing some of the things that he might have done in the past on a throw to Rob Gronkowski or even Chris Hogan, when he can't trust the guys in his offense or on his offensive line to be either protecting him or making plays for him.
These things have really shown up too on third down is when you see it the most. Yeah. The Patriots went 2 for 12 on third down in this game, not including they did have 3 defensive pass interferences or defensive holdings that extended drives on third down, but those notwithstanding, they went 2 for 12. Their only 2 conversions were on 3rd and 1, where there was a Brady sneak and a Sonny Michel run up the middle. It was 17% conversion percentage on third down, their worst mark in any game since that Dolphins game in Week 14 of 2017, the game in Miami that they lost to Jay Cutler. They went 0-11 or 0 for 11 in that game, and that, you remember, is the game where they did not have Rob Gronkowski because he was suspended for his hit on Tre'Davious White. And that the lack of weapons was something that was really apparent in that game because the Patriots also didn't have Julian Edelman during that entire 2017 season. Yeah. So that whole game was Tom Brady basically trying and failing to throw to guys who couldn't get open. It was basically, I think he was 1 for 7 when throwing to Brandon Cooks in that game, 1 for 5 when throwing to Chris Hogan. Philip Dorsett didn't even play in that game. That was I remember coming out of that game and saying, man, if the Patriots lose Rob Gronkowski, they're kind of screwed. And now they're at that same point with Julian Edelman. Yeah. And even when Edelman is on the field, the other teams are able to double Julian Edelman, double James White, or double both of them. There was at least one third down where both of them were doubled in this game. and then they need somebody else to beat one-on-one coverage, and nobody does. And
it was on that deep pass to it was also on that deep pass to Matt Lacoste near the end of the game. It was on 2nd down and 12, I believe, and Sanu and Myers weren't open on the left sideline. White and Edelman were both double covered, so Brady basically just had to force a deep throw into the back of the end zone to Matt Lacoste, which went incomplete.
Yep, and I counted these. I went through all these third downs the other day. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think on at least 8 of them, or at least 7 of them, he was pressured, and most of that pressure was coming instantly. It was basically he dropped back and he already had somebody in his face. He actually did one thing that Tom Brady is still elite at, is moving within the pocket.
Yeah.
Because he probably should have been sacked like 7 times in this game. There were multiple plays where he evaded 2 or 3 guys in the pocket. Most of them ended up resulting in incomplete passes. Some of them were throwaways. Some of them were just balls that he wasn't able to fit into his receivers. But when you have the secondary guys who aren't getting open, and you have an offensive line that's playing at the level that the Patriots offensive line played this last game, it's really hard to win, especially in you just see the difference between that and what they had last year. The last time they played the Chiefs in that AFC Championship game, 3rd down conversions were gigantic for them in that game. They obviously had the 3 3rd and 10s in overtime, but they converted 68% of their 3rd downs in that game, and then 54% when they played the Chiefs in the regular season last year. 17% is not going to get it done with this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that basically for opposing defenses, there's no reason not to blitz the Patriots right now because other than Julian Edelman, a lot of these guys can't get open against man coverage. I do think that, they could probably start taking advantage of that, though, that teams are so willing to blitz them, and the Chiefs really were in this game, by maybe just designing some plays around that. A quick screen to N'Keal Harry, because if he can break one tackle and the opposing team is running a cover 0 blitz, and that play could easily go for a 50, 60-yard touchdown, given N'Keal Harry's speed, athleticism, after-catch ability. Same with Julian Edelman or any of these guys on offense. I think that's one thing that the Patriots could still adjust to, is to plan around some of those blitzes that teams are throwing at them, because guys are having trouble getting open.
Yeah, but they can definitely boost up their creativity a little bit on 3rd down. It's also interesting that Julian Edelman stayed in the block on 2 3rd downs in this game, which was really strange. It was one situation where he lined up kind of on the wing and was probably just supposed to chip somebody and get out, but there was so much pressure that he had to stay in. There was one, he had a really nice cut block on Sorensen, I believe, but it was an interesting thing to see. Be like, oh man, the Pats are doing max protection here. Wait, is that Julian Edelman on the ground in the middle here?
Seriously.
They
had to throw Slater role.
They had to throw everything they could at this Chiefs defense because their offensive line just wasn't getting it done.
This is another week where the Patriots are playing a bad defense. The Cincinnati Bengals are 28th in football, or they're 30th in Football Outsiders defensive DVOA. They're 28th in offensive DVOA. So the Bengals are pretty cruddy in general.
They're bad.
They're 1-12. This should be a game, and we've been saying this for 3 weeks now, where the Patriots offense should be able to rebound and put up a lot of points. I think that this controversy could actually wind up helping the Patriots. Maybe this is something that the Patriots could rally around. I'm sure Bill Belichick is really angry at his TV production department, but also probably at the Bengals for making this such a big deal. So I really would not be surprised if this is somewhat of a revenge game against the Bengals. We've used up a lot of this podcast talking about last week's game and this controversy that we're dealing with, but it's kind of fortunate because there's not a whole lot to talk about with the Bengals. They have some decent receivers and Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, John Ross has a lot of speed. Joe Mixon's been pretty rough at halfback this season. I have him on my fantasy team, so I'm well aware of that. They have
playing better of late.
Yeah,
right?
That is true.
146 yards against the Cleveland last week. So
definitely better recently. Yeah. But offensive line's bad. One thing that I will say is that their pass rush has been pretty good this season, so that is something that could potentially give the Patriots some trouble. Geno Atkins is still there. Carlos Dunlap is still there. It feels like those guys have been there for 25 years. And then Sam Hubbard, who's a second-year player, also has been having a pretty good season as a pass rusher. So that sort of seems to be the strength of their entire team, is that pass rush, but there's not a whole lot to talk about with the Bengals this week.
No, there's really not. I think their best aspects are on special teams, and nobody really cares to talk about their kick return ability and their punt coverage and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we'll get plenty of that from Matthew Slater later in this week. But it was interesting to hear Bill Belichick talk about the Bengals this morning, because it's Bill Belichick's thing is basically just pumping up every single opponent that the Patriots have. And he started his press conference today with like a 4-minute statement on the Bengals. And most of it was the normal stuff you hear about how, they're dangerous. Andy Dalton's an experienced guy, and Joe Mixon can run, and Gio Bernard, blah, blah, blah. There were a couple little, I don't know if they were digs, but they could have come off as digs, where he was like, this is a team with a bad record, but they don't play like a team with a bad record. And I think later on in it, he said something along the lines of they're a good team. They just, when they don't turn the ball over, they really have a good chance of winning. So it's so this is a team with a bad record and a ton of turnovers.
Yeah.
I was keeping an eye out for those, because I'm sure, as you mentioned, Bill Belichick probably isn't particularly happy with the Bengals organization at the moment and with Zach Taylor. But I would not be surprised if this is a quote-unquote revenge game, or at least a statement game for the Patriots. And it also, because of those circumstances, if the Patriots come out and don't play particularly well in this game, if this is sort of I would be flabbergasted if the Patriots lose this game, but if they come out and win, I don't know, 21 to 16 or something like that, and it's one of those kind of sloppy games where they can't really get it going for a while, that's going to be an issue. I mean, they have 3 games remaining in this season. One of them against the Buffalo Bills next week should be a tough game, because the Bills have continued to be a competitive team throughout this entire season. They should destroy the Bengals. They should destroy the Miami Dolphins in Week 17. And if they don't, it's an indictment on where this team is right now, because early in the season, that's one thing they could do well. They didn't play very good teams, but when the teams they played, they beat the hell out of them. So if they can get back to that, then I think it'll give them a lot of confidence moving forward toward the playoffs, because that's what happened last year. They lost those 2 games in December to Miami and Pittsburgh. Then they came out and destroyed the Bills, destroyed the Jets, and really kind of coasted on into the playoffs from there. So I think getting some confidence-building wins in these last couple weeks would be really big for this team going into the postseason.
Let's very quickly play America's favorite game before we have to get out of here. Do you know where guard Michael Jordan went? He's a offensive guard, not a shooting guard or a point guard.
Duke?
Did you go to UNC? I feel like I remember you went to Ohio State, but I don't know.
That's actually what I was going to say.
Ohio State.
You're right.
Wow, nailed that one.
Do you know where Stanley Morgan Jr. went? Not related to the Patriots, Stanley Morgan.
Did he go to Nebraska?
He did go to Nebraska.
Do you know where Rennell Wren went, defensive tackle?
Yes, he went to Washington State?
I think he went to Arizona State. Arizona State.
Man,
wow,
you're
so
killing it this week.
We're nailing some of these.
There are a lot of players on this team.
And I don't know where
heard
Clayton Fegidellum went.
Fegidellum, I do not. B.W. Webb always reminds me of what's that?
The paper company?
The paper company, yeah.
So where do you think Clayton Fegidellum went?
He went to Northwestern.
I'm going to go Idaho. St. Xavier University and the University of Illinois. Former teammate of Ted Karras. We'll have to ask him about Clayton Fegidellum.
Ask him how to pronounce his last name. Also, one more note on Ted Karras. He was back at practice today, so the Patriots could potentially have their starting center back this week, which would obviously be a big boost for them, considering the struggles that James Ferentz had this past week, and the fact that Geno Atkins is still one of the better interior disruptors in the NFL, so your Patriots are going to want to be as fortified as possible in the middle there against him.
For sure, good note. And one other note is that Julian Edelman was not at practice, but he's supposedly that's just a load management issue. So we'll see about that, but it certainly can't hurt to get some of those other wide receivers some reps out there in practice. Keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed, and follow Zach on Twitter at Zack Cox Nessun.